Hey guys, Montel here, and welcome to this edition of Free Thinking with Montel. Look, I am really excited about the guests that I have on today. I want to get them to you as quickly as I can, but before I start, I just want to kind of, maybe if I can, set a little bit of the background up here. We look at the world right now, and I'm really excited about talking to my guest because I think he can explain what's going on. Though there are a lot of leaders, people who call themselves leaders in the world today, from Xi Jinping to Putin to people who were former leaders like Trump and others who call themselves leaders. But I'm wondering whether or not there's really leadership in them. Well, our next guest has really made it his life's mission to define what leadership is and to help those who are seeking to understand how to portray leadership do it better. My guest today is a world-renowned leadership guru. He has presented to companies and organizations around the world, including the United Nations, the Department of State, the World Management Forum in Iran, the U.S. Air Force, and the famed Servant Leadership Institute. He's a best-selling author of One Red Road and Fiercely Loyal: How High-Performing Companies Develop and Retain Top Talent. His focus on human behavior and neuroscience has made him the leadership authority on emotional source code and the anatomy of meaning. He's the founder and host of a top-rated podcast, Leadership and Loyalty. Dov Baron, thank you so much, sir, for joining me today on Free Thinking with Montel.
It is my pleasure and honor to be with you, Montel. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be with you. I'm excited to serve. And thanks for being a guest on our show. We really enjoyed that too. So,
oh my goodness, I had such a good time speaking with you, sir, and I was excited about the opportunity to get to talk to you again today because let's before we get started, let's back up a little bit because I love to do this because I want people to know where you come from. What's your background? Tell me a little bit about where you grew up, how you grew up, where's your from?
Well, we don't have that long, but we'll start with this. I was born in the UK. I've been gone much longer than I lived there, but I was born there. I was born in abject poverty, surrounded by crime and violence and addictions and abuse and all the shitty stories that can happen. And I left when I was 21 and began to travel the world to study with different spiritual masters, metaphysical studies. So I studied Gnostic and Coptic Christianity, Kabbalah, Vedanta, which is Hindu philosophy, Buddhism, and the Tao. Then went on to study Jungian psychology because I'm a polymath. And then I went on from that into the study of what was then called the psychology of excellence. Today is called leadership. That was in the early 80s. Yes, I am that old. And then from there, I studied neuroscience and quantum physics and then put all that together. So that's kind of the overview, grand overview.
And that's really what led you to develop your skills to become a leadership guru, correct?
Yeah, it came out of this when I was 10 years old, I walked into the living room and I saw my mom crying. Now, remember, we're living in a very poor neighborhood in northern England. My mother is a white Jewish woman, and I walk into the living room, she's crying, and I say, "Why are you crying, Mom?" And she points to the TV, and she says, "He's dead." Who's dead? I look at the TV screen. It's not a soccer player. It's not anybody off English TV. I don't know who he is. I don't know who this black man is. I have no idea. And I listen, and he says, "I have a dream that one day," and I become fixated, and I immediately am awakened to this idea. How can a black man of the Christian faith on the other side of the world, which is what it was to us as kids, impact my poor Jewish mother and move her to tears? This is leadership. This is what leadership is. This is the difference it can make. And that was where I began to drive towards. How do you have impact that important, that powerful with people who seemingly you have nothing in common with?
A person who's been on this journey for as long as you've been on it, and you've looked at what we consider leadership along the way, how do you look at today? how can you look at today and think to yourself that there's going to be an opportunity for leadership tomorrow, Dov? I mean, I'm sorry. I've been one of those people. I like you, same thing. I mean, I was born in a little enclave of Baltimore that was called Cherry Hill, which was the first uh, um, Superfund cleanup site in America. Why?
Mm.
Because that's where Bethlehem Steel was, and where Bethlehem Steel was basically just dumping all of its caustic materials in this little black neighborhood. And I was raised about 2.5 blocks from the city dump.
Wow.
I often wonder when I look back on my own life why I've had the neurological disorders that I've had is because when I was a child, I can remember playing in that dump. I can remember running along the dump, having to chase rats out so the older kids could shoot them with BB guns. So, and I remember doing this sometimes barefoot. So, it's not a question anymore for me as to why I think that I'm the first person in my family that's had a neurological disease like MS. Um, but when and I look back and I thought about, I think I talked to you about on your show about what drove me to consider the fact that I would own the definition of myself, and therefore I wasn't going to follow anybody else's lead. But influences like Martin Luther King were there for me also.
Yes.
Um, Profound influences like H. Rap Brown and others were there for me.
Yes.
Um, but nowadays, it's almost like those who were the people who were trying to discuss, no matter what your plight, peace and love is the solution. It's almost as if, as we look around the world, not just in the United States, China, look at what's going on in Hungary right now. I mean, it's almost as if the world has decided, no, screw that. Forget that crap about love and peace. It's time for us to revert back to what is our basic genetic code, hate. And I'm sorry, I'm not a pessimist, but I just don't see how we get out of this. What do you look at when you see this world this way right now?
So what you just said is perfectly valid and completely understandable, and many people feel this way. But let's give it, if I may, can I give it a little bit of history and show
Oh,
you what
please.
this is?
Come on now.
So we moved into a global market, with particularly with the fall of the USSR and with the communist China opening up to become a marketplace. When that happened and the global economy took place, we had the EU, and of course now you've got Britain pulled out of that, right? So you've had all this global dependence on each other. 2008 came along, we had the Great Recession, and that was because the American banks did a lot of bad stuff, and that caused a ripple across the world. That was the beginning of the breakaway where people started to say, ooh, it's dangerous to be connected to everybody else. We need a greater level of independence. We need to be separate from and not reliant upon as much. That was the beginning of what we are seeing today that most people don't even realize was the connection. What happened then is the realization of this global market being a challenge for us is we need to be self-dependent. In that self-dependence became stronger borders, but remember, running right alongside of that is the economic problems and the immigration problems. We've got climate problems. So we've got mass migrations. We've got wars. We've got mass migrations. And if you're worried about immigrants today, yeah, let's just take ourselves forward 20 years. It's going to blow everybody's mind. The migrations from Africa, the migrations from many countries, even where you live, Florida, a lot of these places are going to go underwater and people are going to move. So you're going to have these problems that are going to accelerate. So that brings up nationalism, tribalism. And that tribalism that you're seeing, as you very clearly pointed out, with Hungary, it's Bolsonaro in Brazil. It happened with Rodrigo in the Philippines. It's even happening in countries like the United Kingdom. It's happening in France with Macron only just won the election away from the far right. The far right is raised in Germany, the one country you could be pretty certain it would never happen because of what happened in the Second World War. It's happening there too. It's happening in Australia. We're seeing it all over the world. But what it's actually happening is it's a pushback against globalism and the feeling that there are powers that be, whether that's Charles Schwab and all those guys who are talking about we've got to come together. People are falling back and saying we've got to look after our own. You're absolutely right. That is tribal behavior and that is old DNA, but it's not our nature. Now, here's where that's interesting because people go, well, is that our nature? No, actually, here's what you need to know. If you look at the evolution of human beings,
Yeah, going
we
back to Neanderthal and all the
right back,
various
yeah,
types. Yeah,
absolutely,
correct. They
right,
all intermixed, but
right.
go
So
ahead.
you go all the way back to them, and you say, okay, well, well, we are the ones who came out of it. The Homo sapiens are the one because we killed off everybody. No,
No,
that was true for a while, and then what happened is we interbred and we found a way to build community. That is our nature. The truth of the matter is, it's not the survival of the fittest. It's the survival of those who cooperate the most. That's what we have to remember. That's what we have to come back to. That is the change. Now, is there a movement for that in the world? There is. Is it a smaller movement right now? Yes, but it will rise. I believe it will rise. And people like myself and people like who you may be familiar with, Daniel Lubetsky, who is on Shark Tank. He runs the Kind organization, Kind Bars, etc. I'm a founding member of a group with him and many other authorities called Starts With Us. And we're all doing that work to bring us together, finding a way to come together, even in our differences.
and I mean, I think I was listening to a very interesting comment on one of the cable news channels talking about the fact that there used to be a time when people used to say, "Well, all the world needs is just a good alien. For alien lands, and we'll all come together." And I'm going to say, bullshit. If an alien lands, there's going to be half the group of people who are going to say, how can I take advantage of this guy to help me put down the rest of the people that are here on the planet? And then the other group's going to say, well, how can I take advantage of this guy and make sure that he is seen less than me? And we're going to make the dumbass mistake of trying to fire a bullet or something at him because, what we don't recognize is the fact that if they got here, homeboy, we are nothing more than ants. So, get ready to get squashed. So we bet not fire off. But I mean, how do we get people? And maybe it's because I'm looking through too narrow of a lens. I'm looking through the lens that I see here in the United States of all the division. I mean,
Yes.
the division is now. I don't think it's even come to its close to its peak either. I think we're going to see more. How do we try to convince people to understand that, you know, it took all of us to get to where we are. It's going to take all of us to get to where we want to go.
It's a good question and it's a fair question, Montel. And I think that the answer is very simply, I believe, and you know this from our previous conversation, I believe that the cure for the world is curiosity. If we look at what the problems are, we've stopped being curious about each other. We have embraced our own biases. And so what we have to do is spread, people talk about spreading love. It's too woo woo. It's too like we don't understand what it means. But to become curious about each other, to become curious about what drives this human being. I had a conversation 2 days ago with somebody who is very pro-Trump. Now, to be clear, I'm not anti-Republican, but I am anti-Trump. Right? That's me. It's my opinion.
Sure.
But could I have that conversation with that man who was very pro? I did. And we had a fantastic conversation. And after about 45 minutes, I would consider him a friend. Because I was willing and he was willing to be curious enough about what we had in common rather than to presume what we had that was different. And that is the key. What is it that we have in common versus what is it that we difference on? Because we do have differences. That's okay. That's how we grow.
I mean, when you look at America, and I'm again, I happen to be in a building here in Miami, Florida, that is ethnically predominantly one race, and it doesn't really matter. And then I look around at a lot of the people that are part of this community, this community has changed in the last 10 years down here. At least that's what I've been told. I haven't been here that long, but we have a very, very the highest population of Venezuelans living outside of Venezuela live here
Oh,
in Miami.
wow.
One of the highest populations of Cubans outside of Cuba is here in Miami.
Yes.
There is also a large diaspora of other varied South American nation Latinos who live here. And I'm so sorry if I offended anybody by using that term Latino, because I really am. I'm a little bit behind the power curve of trying to keep up with phrases and terms and things that we're supposed to say. Because I know that in some communities, the Latinx word is okay. In other communities, if they are of Latin descent or South American descent, that's not okay. So I apologize if I offended anybody. But I look around at this community, and though kind of on the surface, it looks like everybody's kind of getting along, but it's a power keg. It's a matchstick.
Hmm.
All it takes is just one little scrape. Flames erupt. And that's what it's like in Texas
Yes.
versus Caucasians, Hispanics, and people of color. That's what it's like outside in some areas of Tennessee. That's what it's like in some areas, even in Maryland. That's what it's like in some areas all over the country. It's like I've been having conversations with our son who's very interested in the future of our planet and future of our country. And he and I sit down sometimes and have some really, really deep rooted conversations. And he wonders whether or not this is the fall of America. I mean, are we getting ready to go through a 15-year period of time where, we've got one person who is a former leader. You just said you're against them. And I will tell you, I've known him. I've met with him multiple times on a couple of occasions, almost had business dealings with him. Um, I think some of the things that he has been saying in the last few days, this man is literally no longer the fuse. He is the match waiting to find the fuse. He's already found the fuse. He's one inch away from the powder keg, and he wants to stick his match right in the powder keg. I'm talking about Trump in the sense that of the things that he said in the last couple of days about, well, if they try to indict me, America will see things like they've never seen before. He's calling out, come on out. I want to have a revolution. I mean, do you think that we got to go through that kind of pain to become curious enough to understand what life would be like without it?
So there's a lot to unpack in there. So let's
I'm
start
sorry.
here.
I'm
So
sorry.
it's okay. It's okay. I totally understand. Let's start here. Um, the first thing I would say is, you talked about how scratch the surface and people are about a powder keg. Honestly, here's my question: is that true, or is that the shit we're fed by both sides of the media, whether it's MSNBC, CNN, or whether it's Fox? It's all adversarial. You used to be in mainstream media and you and I talked about this off air about how if it bleeds, it leads.
Yes.
Well, nobody's reporting how people are getting along. I'll give you an example. A year and a half ago, AOC, very left, and Ted Cruz brought a policy together and got it worked through together. Nobody brought that to the air. That was never talked about. These two people couldn't be further apart. So my question is it true? One of the things I hear from my friends who were in Washington is, oh yeah, we're fine. We're just not fine on camera. So if it bleeds, it leads mentality that's no longer just in the media, it's in social media and it's clickbait. So is it true? My experience, and I get to travel around the United States all the time. I'm a speaker. I speak around the world. And here's what I find. That's not Americans. Like, I love Americans. That's not Americans. That's the bullshit media. That's the politicians. It's not Americans. Most Americans are actually, I believe, far more center of left of center or right of center, but they're not extremists. Are there extremist loonies? Yes. And is the media feeding that? Yes. Is Trump feeding that? Yes. Is some of the left really feeding that? Absolutely. Some of them are downright crazy. So let's remember that the people in the middle are the Americans. So now to unpack the next part, which is, are we at the fall of the American empire? Well, let's just look at that from a place of history. The answer would be yes. Empires last on average about 200 years. America's more than due to fall apart. But now we have to come to the emotional source code piece that you mentioned. What is the emotional source code of America? If I ask Americans the single word that represents America, you and I talked about this in a previous conversation, what do you think that word is? People will say all kinds of things, but without doubt, the word is freedom. Freedom is the word. And so these agitators use that word to agitate people. They're going to take your freedom away. They're taking the freedom away from your right to your own body. They're taking your freedom away for you to manufacture what you want or to have your gun. It doesn't matter. They're using the same thing to agitate. It's freedom. The thing where America's got to get real is this. And I know I'm speaking to a military man, so
No, no, no. Go ahead.
but I'm aware of this. So now we've got the emotional source code, but what's the identity of America? And so if we ask Americans, what is our identity? Who are we in a global identity? So our identity in the global way, the answer is the world's peacekeepers. That's a false identity. The US is not the world's peacekeepers. The US is a warmongering nation, just like any other empire was. The Roman Empire was too. The British Empire was. It's warmongering, and the military industrial complex is what finances the Fed. That's how the Fed is. That's why we're friends with Saudi Arabia, who are a horrible nation, right?
Right.
So we have to understand who we actually are. So who we actually are is a warring nation because war is profitable. And do we want to keep holding this false identity of that we're a peace nation, or do we want to make that a real identity? Because if we want to make that a real identity, then we have to come together.
So, and I think one of the things that you did say, and this, and I would agree with. I've been talking about this quite a bit. When we look at the mainstream media, whether it be right or left, they talk about, well, half of America feels it. No, half of America doesn't feel it anyway. Excuse me. When we break it up, if we look at Democrats, Republicans, independents, we now know that clearly 41% of this country now declares themselves, 41 to 44% of this country declare themselves to be independent.
Yes.
That's leaving less than 56% left. And then if you take that 56% and we cut that in half and say half are Republicans, half are Democrats, okay, well, half of that half, a quarter, are in the extreme, but really only about 60% of that quarter is an extreme. So really now we're talking about, somewhere around a sixth of the nation
Yes.
that's making all of the noise. But unfortunately,
they do make a lot of noise.
They make a lot of noise, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, it's a conversation you and I had off air a long time ago, which was that, okay, let's look at the biases around a religious group, right? So we say, well, these people are warring people and no, that's not true. But the ones who are doing the crazy stuff, they get attention.
Right.
The ones who are doing kind, wonderful stuff, they don't get any attention. So it's the same thing.
I think but the only thing that I throw on the table that sets America a little bit more apart is the fact that we are a nation of guns.
Yes.
We are a nation of a final solution. When I say a final
Mhm.
solution, meaning that when you pick that gun up and walk out your door, the other day I was just we don't have an open carry law here in Florida yet.
Right.
However, I went into a grocery store down here in Florida, and I looked to the right of me, and there was a guy packing on his hip. I didn't see a
Yep.
badge. He had a gun on his hip. And I thought to myself, how come nobody said anything about this? I literally beeline for the front door.
Yeah.
How dare you walk in here with children and people and walk around grabbing a carton of milk and you got a 45 on your hip? I mean, for what? And then I stop and I think to myself, maybe he mistook or misunderstood what the law is down here. You can open carry a long weapon. However, I'm just trying to figure out why we have so many people. First off, I used to be a gun owner. I want to make sure I get this very clear.
Yeah.
I had like 14 guns. I got rid of all of them. Gave them away, gave some away, sold the others, got rid of them. Done. I don't need to have any guns. I think I have maybe one gun left here in my apartment. I have one gun, and that I have locked away in a gun box, and it will stay locked away in a gun box. I haven't taken it out in like 3 years,
Right.
and I'm wondering why I even got that one. But my wife decided that it's okay to have one for in-home protection. And I don't see a problem with that. But I don't need a Uzi. I don't need an M16. I
Who
don't
does?
need an AR-15 that's now I can make my own home printed sear so I can turn it into an automatic weapon. About a week and a half ago, the news media went crazy over the fact that they've just heard they found out about an online presence of some people who have been doing tutorials about how to turn any weapon into an automatic weapon. And the sales of these things and the tutorial went through the roots until they were forced to take it offline. But still, the cat's already out the bag.
Sure.
And at last count I heard, I mean, I think we have 336 million people in America. We have well over 400 million guns. There's more guns in America than there are people.
Yes.
And I call it the final solution because you go grab that. People who don't understand it, once they put it in their hand, it's that silly old saying. Like I think some people think if I have one, I got to use it. It's like if you go out and you study karate, you got to go find somebody to beat up. It's like stop. It's
Yeah.
just really, 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 really just as ignorant as it can possibly be.
But
And
the other side of it, Montel, is again back to the source code, freedom. So the American or people who became American were British who escaped, and there was a war, and so guns were part of the DNA of these people. So people say to me, "Well, are you anti-gun?" Nope. Would I own one? Nope. And they go, "Well, how can you know?" Because I understand that it's part of America's emotional source code. I got that. That's okay. What I would like is to have some sanity around that, which is how old are you? Is there a mental test? Is there any training? Like what people don't know is there's a lot of gun owners in Canada. How come we don't have the shootings? Because you have to have a license, there's testing, there's all kinds of things. And many Canadians have multiple guns. We don't have those problems because there's a responsibility with it. And when the argument is against the responsibility, we know we're dead in the water. And now we're back to the what we talked about earlier, which is the corruption that is creating the fall of the American empire. The corruption is very simple. If a lobbyist is controlling the laws are not democratic laws. And so if the NRA and those others can put money into creating something that becomes a law, you don't have a democracy anymore. If you have Citizens United, which sounds really democratic, it's got nothing to do with democracy, which is about can my company pour a bunch of money into a lobbyist and into getting a law made that's not what people want. Because if you look at it, you know this.
right,
The majority of Americans, the largest majority of Americans, want stricter gun laws. They don't want guns removed. They want stricter gun laws. They also want changes in the prison system. They want all these things that the democracy of America wants, they don't get because of corruption, because of money in a system. That's it. So, can you fix the problem? The problem is not the people, the problem is the money in the system. And people are greedy and they're not going to let go of that. And that's why you have corrupt systems.
I mean, as you speak, I mean, I think one of the questions I failed to ask you, I want to ask you right now, is that your study of human behavior and neuroscience has really shaped a lot of your teachings, has it not?
Everything. It's shaped everything.
And unfortunately, I don't think as in general, do we even try to explain that to the masses. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we also are sorely lacking in our education. As we go from K to 12, we may talk about reading, writing, arithmetic, but we don't talk at all about natural neuroscience to our kids, to those who are coming up. I have conversations all the time with friends who say, well, look at the next generation. The next generation may go about trying to demand change. And I agree in some ways, but they also are afraid to speak out.
Of course. So, I mean, we are living in Orwellian times. I just did a video, and the video is this. It says, warning, trigger warning, trigger warnings may trigger you feeling the need for a trigger warning. Like the whole thing is a circular thing, and so it's Orwellian in that we can't speak, because we're afraid of. I mean, you said Latinx, is it Latino? Well, again, the survey of of that population is they don't particularly like Latinx, but somebody went, well, what's the politically correct term? Who cares? Who cares? Like, if you're offended by Latin, me saying you're Latin, tell me what you'd prefer. I'll use it. If you're like if you are offended by me saying black and you'd rather have another term, fine, let's use it. I don't care.
Instead of going after you because you said black and I'm gonna get you canceled so you don't get to talk anymore.
Right. So this is the challenge. So let's put this now back into the population and have people understand. Human beings. So there's a couple of things we want to understand about human beings. Every human being needs to belong. Every human being, don't care who you are, you need to belong. The problem is we trade belonging for fitting in. There's a distinct difference. We don't know it when we're doing it. When you belong, this is the place I'm allowed to be all of who I am. When I fit in, I must disenfranchise, remove parts of myself in order to be part of this. And we trade one for the other. So when we're fitting in, we go, well, I'm a kind, generous human being, but they don't like kindness in this group. So I'm going to put that to the side because I'm going to be this. So you and I have somebody in common. We won't talk about it here too much, but we have somebody in common who used to be a neo-Nazi. This neo-Nazi is now a personal friend of mine. By the way, I was born Jewish. He's a personal friend of mine, and he speaks around the world against and helping people to de-radicalize them. Why is that important? Because he fit in rather than belonging, but he needed to belong. Now let's add to that. We need to belong, and every human being needs significance. So we need to belong and we need to be important. We need to be seen, to be recognized. Every human being, doesn't matter who you are, whether it's Mother Teresa, the Dalai Lama, or Donald Trump, it's no different. So now, how do you get that significance? Well, we are now in a time, in a world, where you get significance by being a victim of something. So if I say, Montel said this to me, and I can create a bit of a buzz on Twitter or wherever it might be, now I've got that significance coming at me, and you're paying the price. You, Montel, are paying the price. So this is the part of the challenge is, like you're talking about at school, we need to teach relationship communication skills. So we need to teach, you need to belong, Johnny. You need to belong, Susie. So how do you belong? Let's find a way for us all to belong. And you need significance. So let's applaud you for what's great about you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
No, but how do we get them to belong when they don't have to belong? This is where they think they need to belong. They need to be able to look at the screen and see themselves as they say something, and then put it up so they think that everybody loves them. It's like my wife has a couple of friends who literally drive me nuts because the first words out of their mouth was, "Well, I got 34 likes. I got 50." I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Honestly, I don't care. If I like it, I might say something to you, but I don't really care that you put up 35 other people said that they like that bullcrap that you said yesterday. But people are taking
Well,
ownership of their validity through
yeah,
this.
but remember that people are, so we have an epidemic of loneliness. We have
Oh, yeah.
the most connected society in the history of humankind, but we're emotionally disconnected from each other. And so we're deeply, deeply lonely. And until we start addressing that, so in 2015, I wrote a book called Fiercely Loyal. how high-performing companies um, can attract and retain top talent. And in that book, I talked about the 4 C's. And one of those C's was community. And I said, if you're going to build a business and be successful in the future, you must build a community around it. Do you know what I'm telling them all now? I'm telling businesses this around the world is I was wrong. And they go, about what? I said, if you want a business, build a community around it. I said, no, I was wrong. They go, what do you mean? I said, post-COVID, build a community and put a business in it. You have to flip it. We need to connect. We need community. And that is going to make us a better world. And this is how we in business can actually make a better world. Build
And
communities.
when you say that, though, I'm interested to hear your views on the fact that there are so many people now fighting this idea of remote learning, or sorry, remote working. I mean,
Yes.
everybody wants to work remotely, thinking that, oh, that's really better for me. It's really better for me. It's not better for you. You know, if you stay at home and don't interact with another human being, you interact with the 4 walls that are around you. I don't understand how any business can be as successful as it could be without having that sense of human touch, and human touch meaning not necessarily physical touch, but the touch of being in the same space.
Yes. So there's a couple of pieces around that, around the neuroscience too. So we know, first of all, let's start with remote. The new research out of Apple has shown that the hybrid model does not work. Right? So everybody went hybrid, come in 2 days a week, stay home 3, whatever it is. Doesn't work. What works is choice. You want to come in, come in. You don't want to come in, don't come in. However, one of the things that I'm advising companies around with this is this. If you needed 50, just using a number, you needed 50,000 square feet for your offices, you don't need 50,000 square feet anymore. You need 20,000 square feet. The money you spent on the other 30,000 square feet does not belong to you. And they go, what do you mean? It belongs to your community building. And some of that will go into the physical community around you. And a lot of it will come into creating events that are community events every 6 weeks or so, where people can come in and network and connect with each other, because we need that connection. We need to bond with each other. And that will then you've got to that, because dopamine, which is the feel-good hormone in the brain, we get that from every time we scroll up on the feed and see we got likes. That's why we like likes. It's a hit. We get the dopamine hit, but we don't get the and this is really important, the oxytocin hit. The oxytocin is the hormone that bonds us. Now, oxytocin is a fascinating hormone, neurochemical hormone, because oxytocin bonds us. When a mother holds a baby for the first time, she is entirely flooded with it. When she breastfeeds her child, she's entirely flooded with it. When the father is in the room when the baby is born, he is flooded with it. When we make love, we're flooded with it. When we bond with someone who feels something in common, or we hug them, we're flooded with it. But here's what's fascinating about it. So it's the best hormone there is, except it's not. What do you mean? Oxytocin, this hormone that allows us to connect with each other, is the same hormone that allows us to other. It's the same hormone that allows us to. So, for instance, the Nazi soldier who went to the camps and killed babies, did horrendous things, could go home and be a wonderful, loving father. And you go, how the hell does that compartmentalize? It compartmentalizes through this hormone of oxytocin. We have to fire off oxytocin with people we wouldn't normally fire it off with. And that is possible online if we get outside of the bubble. The challenge is the bubble. So the challenge is that you're right because you're only seeing what makes you right. The algorithm says, oh, you like this? Here's more of this. So, for instance, people say to me, how do you stay on top of all these things? I'll give you an example. I watch the BBC. I watch Al Jazeera when it was around. It's now gone, unfortunately. I watch Fox News, CNN. I watch independent news. I watch all these different newses with different angles. RT, Russian TV. I watch them all because I don't want one feedback. Now, here's what's interesting. On social media, that means I get all kinds of different things. I'm confusing the algorithm You need to confuse the algorithm of your life, not of Facebook, by making sure that you're open to getting feedback, to getting input from other sources. So instead of saying, "Oh, those immigrants are terrible," now hold on a minute. Do me a favor. Go spend a week with them. Go spend a day with them, and you'll find out they're just like you. There's no difference. If we keep these crazy laws we've got around immigration, like people say, "Oh, we got to protect our country." Okay, well, let me just explain what's going to happen. Every Nobel Prize that was won by the United States in the last 20 years was by an immigrant. Well, but they're Americans. Yeah, but they were immigrants first. The CEOs of the top 20 technology companies in America are all Indian. They're Indian. And you have no interest in going out into a field to pick lettuce or strawberries and not pay $50 for a lettuce. So you're going to need a couple of people who are immigrants who will happily do it, not because it's shitty work, but because they're willing to work for a living.
I talk about that all the time. I mean, America, you hear all this noise from Florida right now, from Texas right now, all over the country about, shipping immigrants here. Well, keep shipping them out of there and see who picks your field.
Exactly.
Keep shipping them out of there and see who cleans your hotel room.
Exactly.
Keep them out of there and see who takes care of your mother. Because we know that the people that are in geriatric care in the United States of America are mostly immigrants. People who are taking care of babies, mostly immigrants.
Exactly.
People who are picking the fields, mostly immigrants. I say it to my friends all the time. I defy you to find me one black kid or one white kid in America today is going to go out and pick strawberries. They ain't doing it unless you can get $45 an hour, and they may only do it for an hour,
summer or something.
Right. Well, half a summer.
But it's two. But the key is that it's these two areas. It's those at the very bottom who pick the field, right? We're not going to let those in. And we're going to have a brain drain because what we don't realize is, so we've got this idea of we need to slow down population on the planet. Okay, I can understand that because of the resource we use. I get that. But if you're talking about economies, so for instance, the second largest economy in the world is China. We know that. China's in massive trouble. Now, there's all kinds of economic reasons around that, but let's put all those to the side for a moment. One of the reasons it's in massive trouble is because they had a one-child policy.
Yes.
And girls were thrown away, and so many of the men have no women to mate with. The most virgins in a single population are in Japan, right? There are men in their 40s who don't want to be virgins, but are, because there's not enough population. So if you've got the same thing, and what do we know is if you get more wealth, the population goes down. Well, America has got more wealth, and as a result, people have less kids. People who are poorer have more kids because they're workers. So they have more kids. So now what have you got? You've got exactly the problem you think you have, which is now we don't have anybody to step in and take over. So what do we need? We've got a brain drain now. We've got a labor drain. So it's at the very top end of the brain drain, and it's the bottom end of the people who work for the lower fees. So
when you look at
China, wake up to these things.
When you talk about China, though, you look at a population that's extremely old.
Yes.
They have a population, I think, what is like 60% of their population is over the age of 60?
And Japan's got the same problem.
That's crazy. And people don't understand. Give them less than 10 years, they're going to be fighting and trying to go somewhere to find somebody to come work for them. And what's been going on in China, I understand, is like, they went through this huge, massive industrial building thing where they were building apartment complexes and buildings. They didn't put in any elevators, not remembering that as you get older, it's harder to walk up 6 flights of stairs. Now they're going back and trying to charge those people for renovating their buildings to put in an elevator because they can't make it up to their apartment.
Yeah, well, we can talk about the economics of China as a whole different subject, because that's, China's on the brink of economic collapse because of the way it runs its money system. But that's a different subject. However, when I tell to people this and I give advice on this, I say, I know you're worried about China being the second biggest economy and that they may take over from America. Well, actually, digitally, they're already light years ahead of us, years ahead. So forget trying to compete with them. They've already killed you. You're already dead in the water. If you want to understand who your real threat is economically, it's India. Why? Because they produced a lot of kids It's
Yeah.
the second largest population in the world, and they are highly, highly educated. They are highly educated, and only now are they slowing down on their population growth. But there's still lots of women and highly educated women. And if you want to think about it even at a different level, as you mentioned in the intro, I spoke in Iran at the World Business Conference. Do you know that the most educated population of women per capita is Iran?
I didn't know that.
Iranian women, on average, have a master's degree, which is paid for by the government. Now, I am not saying I support the Iranian government. I don't. But here's a little clue. Having spent time with there, most of the Iranians don't either. They're not a big fan of those. They actually, I was constantly reminded, if I may tell you a little story, walking down the street in Iran with three other, so one American, an Australian, and a Brit, and we're walking down the street with the person who had brought us in to speak. And I said, "What's that?" And it's the side of a building, side of a probably 12-story building that says "Death to America." And I said, "What's that?" And he just looks at me and he says, "That's the government. Nobody pays attention to that." He goes, "We love Americans." He goes, "We love Americans. We love British. We love Australians. We don't even dislike the Israelis. They hate us. We don't even know why." Right? So again, this is the if it bleeds, it leads mentality that creates the separation that we need to understand is a false separation. If I strip your skin away, there's no difference between you and me. And even all your ideas may seem different to mine, but when we strip that away, what matters to you? Do you have a family? Yeah. Do you care about them? Yeah, me too. Okay. What are you trying to do in this rhetoric you're spreading? Well, I'm trying to protect my family. Well, so am I. Is this working? Is there a better way? Can we find a way to come together and do it in a different way? Yeah, we can. Oh, well, that would be great.
You refer to yourself as the father of dragons. What does that mean?
It just means that we often think about the things in our lives that we are afraid to face. And so the analogy is this, that a caterpillar falls into a river and is washed away and is afraid it's going to drown. And it's seen all these other butterflies come about, and it thinks that one day it would be a butterfly, but now it's too late. It's going to drown. It's being washed through, and then it gets washed up on the shore. And as it comes around, it realizes that it's no longer a caterpillar, so it must be a butterfly. And it can feel the wings, so it starts to flap. And all of a sudden, a stranger comes out of the distance and approaches and says, "Look into the pond, see yourself." And that creature sees a dragon, not a butterfly. The dragon only emerges from within us. Only emerges from within us when we're willing to breathe fire onto the lies we've told ourselves about ourselves. But that doesn't happen until we've been tossed around in the current. But we're afraid of being tossed around in the current. Again, back to my thing about warning. There's a trigger warning that may give you a trigger about being warned. It's this craziness of avoiding pain. Listen, for a moment, as you listen to us, as you watch us, I want you to stop. I know you want life to be easy, and I know you want life to be good, and so do I. That's a human thing. But I want you to remember for a moment that everything that's good in your life has actually emerged from the difficulty you went through. Montel and I talked about our childhoods. Now, that didn't happen for everybody. In fact, I don't know too many people who escaped from the environment I grew up in. But I made a commitment to observe the pain, not run from it. And one of the things I would challenge you to do is put the pain on paper, because then you can find that inner dragon within you that will breathe fire onto the lies you've been told about what you're not capable of. I was severely dyslexic. I don't know many people who've read as many books as I have now. I've written 13 books. I read all things that were not possible for me. I'm friends with neo-Nazis. I'm friends with people who were in the Ku Klux Klan. I'm friends with people of every other nation. I'm married to somebody who's from a completely different country and culture than me. You're not that different. But the way you understand that is this: we are bonded through our difficulties. If you want to understand that, ask Montel. He served. It's called what? Brothers in arms. We are bonded through that trauma. So look at, what do I have in common with the trauma of this person, rather than judging them or condemning them. And then look at yourself and say, how is this, and this is important, how has this refined me rather than defined me? The things that define you are events that you stick to and you say, this is who I am. I'm that. No, no, no. Let it refine you, because when it refines you, it will rip off, sometimes painfully, the false identities you've held.
Is it just fear that makes people not want to even go through that process?
I think that that's an oversimplification. It is fear, but it's specific fear. It's the fear that I won't be fit in anymore. It's the fear that I'll lose the identity I've been clinging to. It's the fear that if I lose the identity, then I'll lose the love. And all those things are false. They are absolutely false. You can so I, Let me say this: you cannot lose a friend. People go, well, no, no, they weren't your friend. You thought they were. I get that, but it wasn't your friend. Well, I don't want to lose my family. You can't lose family. It's not possible. You can lose people who were connected to you by blood, but they ain't your family. Your family is a spiritual, emotional connection. And by spiritual, I'm not talking about religious, a spiritual, emotional connection where you hold each other up, where you are the champions for each other, where you will breathe fire onto their lies because you love them. You will boot them in the ass when they're telling themselves lies. And you will hold them up when they're pulling themselves down and remind them of their magnificence, of their majesty. But that is only possible when we adopt deep curiosity with compassion, with courage, with a commitment to creating community.
Is that the number one tip you would give a person for their own personal and professional growth?
Absolutely. Embrace curiosity. Stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about all of your biases, even about yourself. What you think is great, question it. Question every belief you have. I wonder if you're courageous enough to do that. Write down right now 3 things you believe and then say, why? You say, okay, I'll give you an example. I say, okay, tell me something you believe. You go, I'm a Christian. Okay, why? Well, my mom's Christian. Oh, so you're Christian because you fell out of a Christian vagina? Well, no, no, I'm Christian because I go to church. Oh, okay, so you stand in a building. Is that why you're Christian? Well, no. Well, what? Because you can put a Ford in a Ferrari garage. It doesn't make it a Ferrari. Okay. Well, why? Well, because I believe in John 3:16. Okay, great. So you believe in that you must come to Christ. All right, fantastic. Why do you believe that? Like, question yourself 5, 6, 7 levels deep about anything you believe. It's not to stop you believing it. It's to give you the truth of why you believe it. Once you do that, it's yours. If you believe it because somebody else gave it to you, it's not yours. But if you are willing to question it and be deeply curious, not antagonistic, but deeply curious, you can find out amazing things about people and about what you've got in common.
And amazing things about yourself. I think it was very interesting when I was in the military. A lot of the philosophy that I have now in life, I didn't have my first 30 years of life. They
No.
were not there. I wasn't even capable of being able to understand it. But you know, a very interesting, very very crazy thing happened. I ended up doing submarine duty, and submarine duty that I did were these very 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 strange missions that were 90 days plus hatch to hatch. They close a hatch, they open a hatch 90 days later.
Wow.
And while I was under that water, I was on even security constraints preclude me from discussing what I was doing today, even though I've been out of the military now for 30 years.
Yeah.
However, I was on very top secret missions where, only 3 of us got an opportunity to look out the periscope and knew where we were going. The captain, executive officer, the operations officer, and myself. And so I found myself on these missions for 90 days, working at the same schedule the captain worked on. I mean, I literally had to be up an hour before he got up, couldn't go to bed until an hour after he went to bed. And he normally worked for 20 hours, 18 hours a day. So I was getting probably 19 hours a day work in, sleeping for 4, 5, getting up, making sure I was ready for him before he got up the next day, ready for whatever we were going to do. But I practiced this little thing every single night when I climbed into this bed. And my bed was underneath the bed of the executive officer. I
Mm,
literally had to slide in, get in a position to go to sleep. If I wanted to roll over, I had to slide my upper body out, turn over, slide back in to turn over my stomach.
right.
So, you can imagine that, you're up quite a bit because it takes you a couple minutes to go back to sleep. And one of the things I did was I started this process every single night when I would go to sleep. Before I go to sleep, I would literally pick a point in time in my history, in my past, 17 years old, 20 years old, 21 years old. And I would think about an incident that took place. And then I would literally take that incident apart. I
Hmm.
can remember times where I would think about, I got in an argument with somebody. I would literally try my best to remember the conversation as best I could and try to figure out, why did I get mad?
Mm,
What made me mad? And then what gave me the audacity to believe that I had an opportunity, I had a right to react to that anger, and then react to that anger in a way that just displayed it to someone else. And I would do this for 90 days in a row. And I came out of that with lots of little things that I kind of used as little monikers in my life. Like, one was before I went to bed every single day. And I do it today. I don't do it anymore in writing it, but every single day before I go to sleep, when I'm laying in that bed and I know I'm getting ready to doze off, I say to myself, what did I do today that's worth talking about tomorrow? If I can't come up with one thing, then why did I waste time?
mhm.
I didn't have to waste time yesterday. I could have opened that door for that lady when she was walking up the steps ahead of me. I didn't grab that door handle. I could have said thank you to that Uber driver and, man, you have a nice day and be safe. I didn't do that. Why didn't I not do that? And the next time I go out, I make sure I do that. It's those little things that you're talking about, I think, in a way of really questioning yourself, but really, really, really questioning yourself, because then you get to know who you are. It helps you define the person that you are. That's why I live by the moniker of I alone will own the definition of who I am. I'm not going to let anybody else define me. I know what made me, and I know some of the things that made me, they were mistakes, and I'm sorry for them. I can't go back and apologize to that person today, but I can apologize. I can apologize and say I'm sorry,
Yep.
and I won't do that again. And I think it's so hard to get people to understand that they can do that. There's nothing wrong. I said it to you a couple weeks back. We were talking. It's like, you listen to a lot of psychiatrists and psychological or psychiatrists and psychologists, and they'll say, well, you spend a lot of time talking to yourself. There's a little something wrong. Ain't nothing wrong with you. If I can't talk to me, who can I talk to? I mean, I like to get up in the morning. When I get up after I did that little thing at night of asking myself, what did I do today that's worth talking about tomorrow? When I get up in the morning and I go in that daze and I walk in the bathroom to do my thing for the first time of the day, and then I go back and I look in the mirror and I grab my toothbrush. When I'm looking in that mirror, I say those things that I think I did yesterday that were worth talking about today. Why? Because it helps me start my day with a success rather than a, oh, woe is me, what I got to do today.
You got it. There's so much focus, and there has been for the last. I've been doing what I do for 35 years, and it's about that long that there's been a bigger focus. When I started, there was a rack on a shelf that was self-help. Now there's entire bookstores that are on it. And honestly, I think most of it is recycling. Um, and by that, I don't mean by the authors, I mean by the readers. And because okay, you're reading this stuff again, but what are you doing with it? And the answer is only in this. It's not the personal development, it's the self-awareness, because you can't put something into something that's already full. So it's the self-awareness. Exactly what you just said. What did I do yesterday that I'm really proud of, that's worth talking about? What did I do yesterday that and this is important for me, I do this. What did I do yesterday that I'm not proud of? And how can I do it better? Because honestly, I'll tell you this, and this is my opinion. I don't give a shit about your apology. You want to apologize to me? I don't give a shit. What I care about is your accountability. So you want to say to me, I'm sorry. I'm like, okay. But you want to say to me, I'm sorry, here's what I did, and here's what I'm going to do moving forward. Fantastic. Because now there's self acknowledgement, there's self awareness, and you are going to make yourself into a better human being. And the fact that you apologize to me is simply a catalyst for that. And so I have to do that. I got a phone call today from somebody I did that with 2 weeks ago, who I called and I sent him a note and said, listen, we met. I was not happy with how I was with you. And he said, "What do you mean?" He said to me, "I have no problem with what you said." I go, "What you don't understand is this is not about you. I'm not happy with me in how I was with you. I did not behave in a way that is who I want to be. And so I'm needing to apologize to you for that and tell you that from now on, my behavior will be different." And I got a call from him today and go, I didn't understand what you did, but now I really get it. Thank you. It's the self-awareness, and that's what you are talking about there, that self-awareness that makes you a better man. Because we can't go back. We can't, we're all being canceled for what we said 10 years ago. Well, I can't go back in that. I don't have that ability. But I can be accountable and say, "Oh, yes, thank you for letting me know. I'll apologize and I'll do better, but don't nail me to the cross."
Gotcha. I'm almost out of time, my friend. And first off, if anybody wanted to find out and get more information about Dov Baron, where would they go?
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. If you Google DovBaron, you'll be overwhelmed with how much
Mm.
comes up. But if you actually want to know about me, you can go to dovbaron.com, DovBaron.com. You can find me on all the social media outlets. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my business one mostly. You can find my YouTube channel. You'll find me on there too, Dov Baron Leadership. I also write for Medium on The Curious Leader. You'll find my stuff there. And, anyway, and I'm going to do something crazy. My personal email, and yes, I do read my personal email, is dov, at dovbaron.com. If I'm on the planet to serve, if there's some way I can serve you, reach out to me. But do not forget what I said. Stay
Absolutely.
curious, my friends.
Well, I
Stay
got to tell you
curious.
something. That right there, that line, "Stay curious," is part of the reason why I definitely wanted to have you on, because I was so curious as to your answers to a lot of the things that I asked you today. I'd love to have you back, my friend. I know that everybody wants you, but at some point in time, if you ever want to just chop it up again with me, I'd love to have another conversation with you.
It
We're out
would
of
be a
time today.
pleasure and an honor. Thank you, sir.
Honor for me too. We have a lot of mutual friends, so we'll stay in touch through them, and we'll also stay in touch. Period. I consider you a friend now, without a doubt. If there
Thank
was
you.
one last thing you'd like to leave with my viewers who understand, I will tell you, they understand and they beg for the insights that you have.
Thank you.
What would be that one thing that you share with them?
The one thing I would share with you is be willing to question your identity. Ask yourself, who am I in the projection to the world? And if I'm really courageous, where is that false? And what is hiding underneath? What did you have to disenfranchise? What did you have to push away in order to fit in? Because what you've pushed away, in the words of Joseph Campbell, is the treasure. And until we have the courage to enter into the dark cave, we will never find the treasure that we're looking for. That is what waits for you. It takes courage to do it. It takes curiosity to do it, but it will make you into the person that you are at your soulful level.
Staying curious, my friend. I will stay curious. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. You have a great day. I hope you enjoyed this edition of Free Thinking with Montel, and we'll see you the next time. Dov Baron, my friend, you stay well, stay healthy, stay safe.
And the same to you and your family.
Absolutely, my friend. Thank you. Thanks for joining me on Free Thinking with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear feedback, so please send us your comments.